Hey everyone, so let's talk a little bit about revision today. I feel like this is one of the stages that's most often attempted to be skipped by English 1010 students, and I would probably attribute that a bit to maybe even time frames of your previous writing experiences. Maybe you had to write something and turn it in the next day. Maybe you're used to doing some form of quick writing where you had to get all of your writing complete within the hour. Also, I think that sometimes we skip revision because we wait till the last minute to write, and some of you are probably nodding your heads at that. So we've got to figure out a way to understand why revision is important and how to do it. It's a really important part of the process. A lot of times there's this myth that there are good writers and there are bad writers, and not really a lot in between. That's simply not true. What good writers do to end up getting really good pieces of writing in the end is that they know they have to go through the writing process, and a big chunk of that includes time for revision. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what revision actually is. This is when you take time to address what we call higher order concerns in your writing. So that might include things like, well, did you meet the assignment guidelines? Are you actually doing what you're supposed to do? Does the writing do that? Are you meeting genre expectations? Is there something big that's maybe missing that's supposed to be an important component of that genre? This is really the content phase. This is where you actually make big changes to your content. So maybe where should you add some information? Where should you take information away? Is there a place to add more detail? Is there a place where if you're doing a research paper, more research is needed? Do you really need to maybe change directions? Maybe your content does change directions and it shouldn't, and you have to cut part of that and go a different way. So this is really where we focus on making our content as best as it can be. You would also focus here on organization, so considering how everything can be arranged. This may be a little more straightforward in something like a narrative, although there are different ways to organize narratives. But especially when you are working on a piece of writing and you've got maybe different points that you're working with, you don't necessarily have to arrange them in the order that they came out of your brain. So you have to really consider what impact it's going to have on your reader to read that information in a particular way. And again, we talked a little bit about research, so it's great if you want to check at this point to see if you have, if your writing needs to incorporate research, checking your reliable information and how it connects to your ideas. So how do you get feedback in order to be able to revise? Because to me, I can't separate those two things. If I'm revising, I'm getting feedback from someone. It's the only real way I know how to revise. I can do it a little myself, but at some point we get really close to our writing and it's difficult to step back and see it from that readership perspective. So one thing you'll want to do, first of all, is get a reader and ask your reader to help you focus on those items that are mentioned on that previous slide. So this could be a writing center tutor. It could be a friend, a classmate, someone you trust, to be honest with you and to really kind of help you see it. You want them to support you, but you also want them to give you some real actual changes that you can implement. You should be open to feedback and be open to listening. Try not to be defensive when someone is giving you feedback about your piece of writing. You want to hear what they have to say, especially for someone who is serving as your peer reader. So for example, if a Writing Center tutor tells you that part of your information isn't clear to them or it doesn't make sense, don't be defensive about that. It's not that they're trying to say you're a bad writer, because you're not, but they're trying to tell you that as an interested reader, it's not coming across the way that you probably want it to. So really be invested in listening and being open to the feedback that you get. Again, you don't have to make all the changes that were recommended. You are ultimately the writer. You are ultimately in the driver's seat. But again, it helps to think about writing as communication and if you're doing that well. You want to make sure you're having a conversation about writing. So when you're getting feedback, it shouldn't be one-sided either. It shouldn't just be them telling you exactly what to do. Ask the reader questions. Ask them about places that you're not sure about. And I'm going to give you an example of that in a minute. So give them something to build off of. If you have questions, ask them. And then, of course, accept that change is inevitable. So that's a good thing with writing. It's hard to let go of writing sometimes once we pour it onto the page. I mean, sometimes we will it, we wish it to be done. We want it to be done because it is a tough process. But change is what makes it better. I don't think there's ever been a piece that I have revised that I wasn't glad for it in the end, that I went through the process, even if it was tough. So invite change. Be aware that that is part of the writing process. All right, so what to do with feedback when you get it. So give yourself time to incorporate suggestions. It does take time to do this, right? So you want to make sure that when you get those suggestions, you don't do it an hour before your assignment is due. Give yourself at least a few days, if you're lucky enough, a week, and depending on what class you're in, what you're doing, maybe even up to 2-3 weeks before you have to turn it in. So start with the biggest task that could change other parts of your paper and work your way through to the smallest changes as needed. So sometimes revision can be overwhelming because you do have a lot to accomplish. So start with the content, work your way through everything you need to do for that. Move on then maybe to organization and then down to stylistic choices until you feel like you're at a really good point and are ready to move into the editing phase. And then again, if you have time, repeat, get more feedback, get someone to read it again, make changes again, and hopefully those changes will come less and less as you work your way through the process. Now, I wanted to show you an example of this sort of in process. I wanted you to see that this is, in fact, what I do and that I do take my own advice. So I'm going to pull up actually something that I wrote fairly recently. And I wanted you to see this is my husband's feedback. He's my built-in reader. I feel sorry for him. He has to do this for me all the time. And so this is a recent piece of writing that I did where I'm looking at COVID-19 and feminist perspectives to look at gender inequality issues in higher education. So I wanted to kind of show you, this is a full draft, so I have my full draft, but I was ready to let it go and get some feedback. So over here, I kind of outlined what I was trying to accomplish with the paper. So again, remember me saying that I was trying to make this a conversation with my reader. So even though we were doing this asynchronously, I wanted my reader to know what I was trying to accomplish here. And you can see here, this is where I started getting some feedback. So my reader was telling me to be specific in a certain way. I also gave, again, speaking of that conversation, here is one of my comments. So I was trying to ask about if I had too much going on, then I need to split it apart. So I'm talking here, speaking to organization, and then I get some feedback on that. So I'm going to scroll a little bit here just so you can kind of see, again, some of these examples. So everything from word choice to, I mean, if there's a typo, now that's clearly what we would focus on in editing. But I appreciated him, my reader pointed this out here because I didn't want to let that one typo go. This is another place where content is needed. So I needed to be more specific about something that I was talking about. Let's keep going. I'm finding some more. This has to do with readability and sentence structure here. So I might save that after I add some of the content, right? So it was a very choppy area that I needed to work on. Transitions, that has to do with organization. And some questions and answers here too. Again, this is kind of an example of some more of the conversation, right? See, here's some readability again. So this is the process that I went through in order to this is a funny comment. It's actually referring to something going on in my paper. This is a great example though of exactly how we do this when we are writing. It takes feedback from someone. Once you get that feedback, you can incorporate it, you know the direction to go in, and you're good to go. You're solid. So give yourself time to do that. Well, first of all, you do have time built in to do that, right? Because you are going to hit a round of revision before you turn it in for your power draft. And then you have, once you get the feedback on your power draft from me, you've got until the end of the semester to nail down a really strong revision of your piece of writing. All right, I feel confident you guys can do it. and best of luck to you in your revision.